So Peters was born in Pontiac, Michigan, is a fifth-generation Michigander. He has represented Michigan in the Senate since 2015 after serving in the House from 2009 to 15. He became chair of the DSCC in 2021 and was reappointed in 2023. The Senate Democrats regained the majority, and he and his team are working hard on fundraising, advertising, and a ground game to keep it. Peters is also chairman of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, serves on Armed Services and Commerce, Science, and Transportation, where he's chairman of Surface Transportation. During this Congress, he was also appointed to serve on Appropriations. This is amazing to me. For a second straight Congress, the Nonpartisan Center for Effective Lawmaking recognized Peters as the most effective senator in the U.S. Senate. In the last Congress, he authored 19 bills that were signed into law, the most by a U.S. senator in a single Congress in 40 years. The event today will be moderated by me and Bankaley Thompson. Bankaley is a nationally acclaimed journalist and standard bearer for economic justice. He's opinion columnist of the Detroit News, considered the leading black opinion journalist in Michigan, founding dean of the anti-poverty think tank, the Pulse Institute, the former longtime top editor of the Michigan Chronicle, and the first African-American newspaper editor to interview former President Obama. His latest book is Fiery Conscience, and last year it was featured in Forbes magazine. My own background has been a Clinton and Bush White House spokesman and senior staff for four-star General Barry McCaffrey, as drug czar, Representatives John Conyers, Charles Rangel, Claude Pepper, Ed Koch, and Senator Ted Kennedy. Now I'm the president of Robert Wiener Associates News, and I'm proud to have won the National Press Club President's Award for recruiting young journalists as bylined op-ed writers with over 1,000 articles to date in major media and counting. Bankaley and I want to thank Olivia Ardito and Thomas Alvis, who's here today. Thomas, where are you? They're in the back. You met him on the way in. For helping to generate and organize today's program. Dr. Patricia Berg, my wife, right here, for editing the release and the materials, and National Press Club events manager, George Arfkin, for enormous help on the logistics. The conventional wisdom is that the House flips to Democratic and the Senate loses its majority. Hakeem Jeffries said the House can pick up and is targeting 4 seats in New York and 7 in California and in the South. Today, Senator Peters will tell us the Democratic objectives and why he believes this should be and is realistic. So later, can we play the tape after the election? Absolutely. Okay. The way this is going to work is now Bankaley Thompson will give his brief opening statement, and he will ask the first question. Bankaley and I will flip for a couple of questions back and forth, and then we're going to open it up to all of you so that you can all ask any questions you like. And as I said, this is indeed a conversation. So I'm very proud to introduce my co-moderator and wonderful friend for decades and decades, Bankaley Thompson.
Thank you so much, Bob, for being an advocate of what politics should be, doing the most good for the most people. A free and democratic society like ours needs a vibrant press that engages our public officials on a myriad of issues facing the nation. And there is no better place to table our nation's issues than the hallowed stage of the National Press Club here in Washington. The Senate stands as the most powerful legislative body in the world, so we owe it to ourselves to continue to discourse about the state of our democracy, which is contingent on the current Senate races across the nation, in which Senator Peters has an instrumental role, and of course he's soon to be the senior senator from my hometown of Michigan. Senator Peters, we believe, can make morality as a guiding principle dictated by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s fierce urgency of now, with the quality of candidates you offer the nation. I hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Bankaley. It's wonderful to be here with you in Washington. You and I have known each other a long time in your capacity as a leading journalist in Michigan, and it's great to be with you. And Bob, thank you for all of your leadership here and bringing all of us together for this event. And just to pick up briefly on Bankaley's comments, a free press is absolutely vital to our democracy when you think about the tenets of it. And we've had some attacks against the open and free press by folks, and that's a direct attack on our democracy. So thank you to all the journalists that are here. Thank you for the work that you do. You play a vital function in making sure that this great country continues to be great. So thank you. So I'll kick off a little overview on where we are in our Senate races. You mentioned the last race or the last cycle, where folks, if you recall, no one thought we could possibly win in the last cycle, and they said, Gary, why are you taking the DSEC? This is like a no-win job. It's a midterm. Look at histories against you, and look at the economic issues, the president's favorability. All the stuff you could go right down the list. But I believed, because we had great candidates, and the candidate quality difference was significant last cycle. And you think about candidate quality differences in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania, it was clear that we had the best candidates. But all of you have followed politics for a long time. Just because you're the best candidate doesn't mean you actually win. You also have to run a really good campaign. And understand what you got to do in order to win. And so we worked with those candidates very closely. They had great campaigns. We assisted them and worked with them. And the one thing that we did at the DS, and I bring this up because it's really about our strategy this time as well, the playbook. And what we did last cycle, which was different, for the first time in the history of the DSCC, we put more money into the ground campaign than we did in the air and electronic. And in my view, and I felt pretty strongly about that, is that we're in just really close races. These were all battlegrounds. They were going to come down to the wire. And the way you win a close race is you have a good ground campaign. You're out talking to folks. You're making sure they get out to the polls and vote. And we put that in place, and that's why we won. I mean, if you look actually around the country in the last election, it wasn't that great for Democrats. We didn't win that much. We didn't do as well in the House as we thought. It was just our Senate states that we did well, and it was because our candidates and the campaign that we put together. Certainly we had an assist with the Dobbs decision. There's no question about that with turnout in the midterm, but we had to do a lot more than just that. You just can't rely on that. You also have to put the campaign in place in order to win. And when it was all said and done, not only did we hold the Senate, we expanded it. So we were very proud of that. And then my colleagues asked me to do it again. Not usually people don't do 2 tours of the DSCC, but I'm here. And but the best news is that basically all of the central team, so I think we're just on tour again, of the group that we had for that first cycle. And what we're doing now is the same thing we did last cycle. So we're bringing the same playbook. We have superior candidates relative to the Republicans that all of our incumbents and our challengers, or our candidates are running. And I like that. I think you can put them on a scale. If I were to characterize the Republican candidates, and it's like a continuum. It starts at flawed, and it goes to very flawed. But most of them are more towards the very flawed. In fact, some are actually pushing the very flawed. Carrie Lake is probably an example of one pushing the very flawed element forward, but she's got a lot of company. She's not by herself in that area. And so once again, and I can go through some of the states, but we can with your questions as well. So, but with that, we have that kind of quality issue. We have seen that throughout this election, even when polling information or data wasn't great in the presidential race. When President Biden was in the race, for example, his numbers, as all of you know, were fairly weak. But all of our Senate candidates were doing well. They were outperforming. They were leading. They had strong campaigns. And it was because people look at Senate races as candidate versus candidate races, and the quality difference really paid dividends to us. That's continuing. Clearly, the enthusiasm in the Democratic Party is elevated right now with Kamala Harris's campaign. Unprecedented volunteer activity we're seeing right now. People are very engaged. The numbers are continuing to move in the right direction. They're still close, as we would anticipate, because this is just by nature will be a close race. Our battleground states, which are usually really aligned with presidential battlegrounds, with a couple of exceptions, are 2 top races in Montana and Ohio. Those are not states that the Vice President Harris is going to be campaigning in. She's definitely not going to be in Montana. So it's up to us in order for us to carry the ground campaign and the organization for our Senate candidates. But right now, we are in a position where I always expected we'd be, and that's close. And we're after Labor Day. All of our candidates, incumbents, are either in the margin of error or slightly above. And when they are in the margin of error, they're at the top end of the margin, not the bottom end of the margin. And that's a good place to be. We're continuing to put the resources in place. We're building great ground campaigns, just like we did in the last cycle. Those ground campaigns will turn out our voters. And when you think of the abortion issue, which was certainly helpful to get turnout people for us last cycle, and when you had referendums in Michigan, for example, last cycle, Bankley, Prop 3, as you know, is the top vote getter in the whole state by a big margin and pulled everybody up on the Democratic ticket. We had good candidates, too, not to diminish that, but we had this, when you have Prop 3, we had the highest turnout, for example, in Michigan of 18 to 29-year-olds in the entire country last cycle, and it was really Prop 3 that brought folks out when you do the analysis afterwards. And we have a number of those initiatives in our key states. We have one in Montana. We have one in Arizona. We have one in Florida, which is we'll talk about as a pickup opportunity. Those will also have the same kind of impact for us on election time. So when I look at, I'm going to probably anticipate some questions. Folks are going to ask me about Montana, I suspect, if I could take that one before I get the question. Montana is a race where we have an amazing incumbent. Jon Tester is as authentic as you can possibly get in Montana, a multi-generation farmer, tied his roots to the land. People in Montana have gotten to know Jon. He's been able to win tough races, so what he's facing now is no different. And he is a great retail politician, and retail really matters, particularly in a small state. Montana is a really big state geographically, but small state from a population perspective. A little under, has 2 congressional districts, but basically almost like running for Congress in Montana in terms of the number of people. And those kinds of personal relationships make a difference, as we see in Congress, where members of Congress can outperform considerably whatever the top of the ticket is doing because of those years of getting to know folks in their district, and in Jon Tester's case, in his state. People know him, they respect him, and that makes the difference. You're seeing some polling numbers; they're all over the place. Our polling still shows we're in a good place, but you'll see other polling that people will look at. But I'm just going to warn folks, it is really hard, always is hard, really hard to poll in Montana. It's tough. It's a small state, rural state, always tough. And right now, because of the attention, Montana's got all of the attention of the whole country because of this really big race. You talk to folks in Montana, they're saying, we have like a pollster call us every day. People really do not like being called by a pollster every day. And they're usually saying, leave me alone. They're usually using language much more colorful than I'll use here at the press club, but like, I'm not going to talk to any more pollsters. Quite frankly, I don't know who's talking to pollsters anymore in Montana because they're just kind of fed up with all of that. So I would take that with a real grain of salt. And I kind of compare what's happening in Montana to what happened in another race in a small state where, in this case, Democrats thought we were really looking good. And that was in Maine against Susan Collins when she ran for re-election. It was a big, I wasn't the DS chair by there, I was running myself, but a big race, lots of money, lots of attention. Susan Collins was never up in the polls the whole time. Everybody thought her days were numbered. And even before election, she was down in the polls. And she ended up winning, I think it was by 8 or 9%, 9 points. So that's kind of similar. The parallel to what's going on in Montana is there. Same kind of thing, retail politics. And John's running against a highly flawed candidate there as well. So let me turn it over and we can start taking questions.
Okay, Bankley, as the Michigan Detroit news person, is there anybody else from Michigan here, by the way? Great. Okay, we'll get you your questions. But he'll ask the first question, and we'll go from there.
Well, we're speaking to the nation. This is the nation's journalist, so we're not playing the Michigan.
Right.
But anyway, Senator, I want to lead off as a point of departure for this conversation. The Democratic messaging machine. For years, Democrats have been criticized as not having an effective messaging machine. That sometimes we even ask the question, does the messaging machine, does it usually or is it regularly oiled, if you will? Because, Democrats say, well, we're doing so much, but the message is not getting out. Can you tell this gathering that, in fact, that you're confident that the message in 2024 with the Senate race suddenly overlaps with the presidential race as well, that your message is getting across urban America and rural America? Is it resonating?
Yeah, and I'm going to take I'm going to bring it from the perspective of our Senate races. So when you're talking about messaging in a Senate race, to me, it's critically important for the individual person running for the Senate who is a senator. The message is likely to be different in the states. They have to address the issues that are most important in their state. They have to connect with folks, and quite frankly, it's usually good. This is not easy to do, but try to not to nationalize your race. If we just nationalize the race, then that's, of course, we've seen in recent years it's a lot harder to do, and whatever the presidential candidate does in the state, the Senate is usually aligned. But obviously in places like Ohio and Montana and others, we can't do that. We can't nationalize the race. So the message that John Tester is going to be talking about is going to be a lot different than in Ohio, because Ohio is a different state. What I often will recommend, and you may have picked this up in your years of watching Michigan politics and my involvement in it, though, I always tell candidates, somebody who might be new, my incumbents know this already, but when you're running for the Senate or for Congress, don't run as, in your mind, you're not running for Congress, you're not running for Senate. Run like you're running for mayor. You're running for mayor. Localize. You're running for, when you go into a town, talk about what's important in Kalamazoo. Talk about what's important in the city of Detroit. Talk about what the folks in Traverse City are talking about, and how you can have an impact to help their lives. And the issues, there's a lot of similarity, but there are also the nuances. And the nuances usually speak louder to voters than just talking the regular talking points for whatever the national campaign is. So there are, when you approach it like that, that's why we let, obviously, our individual candidates drive what they're talking about. We'll leverage that, make sure that it's out. But in those cases, the more you localize, the more you're likely to win, and you very likely could outperform the top of the ticket because of that. Because there are still crossover votes. Folks think that doesn't happen. It does. I've experienced it. When I ran for the first time I ran in the House, I was the first Democrat in my district in Oakland County since 1893. And they came at me with everything they had the second term, and I won. But the Republican governor in our state, Rick Snyder, he won my district by 26 points, and I still got reelected as a Democrat in the district. So the people do split. That was like a quarter of the electorate voting for a Republican governor and voting for me. And so I know it works, and I could go through some of our Senate races, and that kind of difference. John Tester's going to have to show that, obviously, in Montana. He's done it before. He can do it again. So I think voters will focus in on how you are just showing you are all about the people in your state, and you can really focus on some of the nuances that people send that message to people, which is so important.
Well, let me follow up on that messaging question, specifically with the economy. So do local candidates have to show a picture of a dozen eggs at $4 a year ago and $2 today? That would be effective. Do they need to show a picture of gas prices on the tank on the display at $4 and now at $2.89 a gallon? Do they need to show that so that people realize it does affect their lives? So the way I was going to ask this question, though, is why is the message not succeeding on the economy, especially that despite virtually all economists saying we were headed to a recession following COVID, Biden and Harris stopped a recession that was all predicted by legislation pumping resources into people's pockets and people programs. And now the World Bank says the U.S. is powering the world's economy. So why, despite now restored low inflation, record jobs, lower interest rates, low unemployment, is the administration not credited? Why are they not credited? Or is it just a lagging indicator? Or do they need to do the kind of ads maybe we just described? For the economy, instead of the polls blaming them for something that's just not true. So what can Senate Democrats do about this with just 40 days left?
Well, it is about penning contrast, and first recognizing that things are higher. That was ever since the pandemic, and understand the pandemic messed up supply chains. You saw costs. It wasn't just in the United States; it was the entire world that got impacted by that. But certainly, candidates have to recognize that people are seeing that prices are higher than they were prior to the pandemic. And although you're right, it's inflation is down considerably. We're seeing the Fed now lowering interest rates. The costs are starting to go down, and that there is a lag to people seeing what's happening with that. But then it's also about the policies and how are we reducing cost for folks. So one of the biggest issues and one of the most powerful issues, and one that people are focused on, are things like prescription drug costs that have gone up dramatically in the past and are now becoming more affordable because of the work for Democrats. So, for example, for the first time now, Democrats are able to get legislation to require drug companies to negotiate lower drug prices for Medicare. We've capped the amount that seniors would pay at $2,000 for their prescription drugs. And a huge victory was on insulin, which is used by many seniors that deal with diabetes, capped at $35 a month. That was a cap. They were paying considerably more than that. And so that was Democrats. And then we paint the contrast. You have to remember the reason you're only paying $35 is because the Democrats, because every single Republican voted against it. Every single Republican. So when you say, oh my gosh, I'm paying less for insulin. Well, every Republican tried to stop that because they were standing up for drug companies and not for everyday Americans. And so those are the kinds of things that you talk about in our campaigns. This is what we did. This is what we battled to do to bring down those costs. And we'll continue to talk about that.
Senator, I'm thinking here, when you ran in your last re-election, Detroit played a crucial role, one of the nation's largest African-American cities. And we're kind of in a state of bewilderment, given that the Republican flag bearer, Donald Trump, seems to be, or appears to be, gaining some ground with African-American voters, black men. And I'm, curious to ask you, why do you think that is the case here? Is there a missing link, or is there something that Democrats are not doing with their base that seemingly gives credence for Trump to be, appearing to make some inroads with black men, the base of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think part of this goes back to just making sure folks see some of the facts as well. I mean, you're looking at black unemployment now; it's the lowest it's been in a long, long time. Beneficiaries from the Biden-Harris administration, new business formations with minority-owned businesses, black-owned businesses is way up, and that's what I hear when I'm in Detroit and other places. Folks want to live their version of the American dream, often to start a business, hire folks, build, but it's difficult to have access to capital in the past. The Vice President Harris, Biden administration, has done a lot now that allow more seed capital necessary for people to start a business, and we're seeing that with African American businesses now, the biggest we've seen in probably ever in terms of new business starts. So you gotta. Sometimes people don't feel it directly. You have to talk about what's happening and how they should take advantage of some of the opportunities that are there for them. And when people see what the work that has been done, that's tangible, not just promises that don't ever get realized, that we can prevail. You're seeing those numbers are changing. I think Kamala Harris has been doing a great job of articulating that, and some of the softness in numbers that we saw through the summer are starting to firm up. But you can never take we use a Michigan example, never can take your foot off the gas on the car. Keep pushing forward and talking about what we have done. But it's also about the future. Most elections are not about the past, and I don't think anybody wins because you say, look at the good job I did in the past. They're like, okay, great. What are you going to do for me in the future? That's what I care about. And so Kamala leaning into helping folks with the cost of home ownership, for example, and folks that want to be able to buy a home, get out of rental situations, particularly in our cities, that want to be able to have that stake in the ground. And how can you help folks get that initial down payment to be able to buy that house, to be able to build equity for your financial future? Small business loans she's talking about as well. All those things are going to have a big impact, not just in our cities, but in our rural areas as well. And rural voters are going to realize that these are things that are critical for them too. And so it's about that future vision.
Okay, my next one is, I'm not going to ask the one my cousin asked me to ask about why are so many Senate Republicans just acolytes, sycophants for Trump. If you want to answer that one, that's fine. But I'm not going to ask that one. Okay. Most strategists before the last midterm said Biden should focus on other issues besides saving our democracy, but he stuck with his gut. And he made that the central overriding issue with speech after speech about it. He proved right then, given the results. And is that still the case? Is it that important now? Do people see their basic voter rights blocked as the main thing that leads to all other issues being solved? Or is that fading?
I think it's still a central issue. You know how you stack them up, and again, it kind of depends on the individuals where you are. But there's no question that continues to be a powerful issue. That people understand that there are folks that have autocratic tendencies. Donald Trump has that. When you think about the world leaders that he praises, they're autocrats. They're folks who are counter to the democratic system that we love so much in this country. He's been telegraphing that all the time. I think January 6th was a pretty good telegraph of what that guy is all about and how fearful we should be about him if he gets power again. We're going to be in a precarious situation. So it's important to remind folks how people felt after January 6th. I don't care. Most folks were shocked as they watched the events that transpired on that day, when Donald Trump was back rooting them on in the White House, and yet some people want to put that guy back in the White House. Like, don't be surprised if that happens again, because he's already telegraphed it, and we just have to keep reminding folks of that, of the danger that we have. It's still a central issue. There are a lot of issues that people are thinking about. They're thinking about rights being taken away too. And so when you're looking at reproductive freedom, what happened, that an entrenched right for women for 5 decades was stripped away because of the Supreme Court that Donald Trump and the Republicans just put in. And the Republicans, during the time they were in the majority, actually refused to put appointee of Barack Obama in the Supreme Court. If they take the majority in the Senate, you're going to see the same kind of thing happen with Kamala, when Kamala runs. I'm going to put that out. When Kamala wins the election, if she doesn't have a majority in the Senate, it's going to be a huge barrier, and you may see further judges appointed that don't believe in the rule of law, and that's our wall against autocratic tendencies. It held after the last election when Donald Trump tried to undermine the election, yet the judiciary stayed strong and didn't allow him to do that. But if you give him more time in the presidency, that will all erode. And we need to make sure we remind folks of what is at stake. And I do believe that it is powerful.
So what do you see, Senator, as the biggest single deterrent here? We talk about, the significance of the institution of the judiciary, the free press, and those institutions that bear the hallmarks of our nation. What do you see as the biggest single deterrent to protect the erosion of these rights you're talking about?
Elections. So we have to maintain the integrity of elections, which we've had free and fair. We're going to continue. And then people have to show up and vote. And you have to vote for candidates who share your values, believe that one thing that should never be on the ballot. Everyone should agree that we have to keep free and fair elections and democracy. But we know that there are people running that don't share that belief. And they're telegraphing, back to my comments about Donald Trump. And so the way we keep this democracy is by voting in big numbers and making our voice heard in no uncertain terms. And I think, we're seeing that. We're seeing the shift in this country. The numbers are getting better for our Senate candidates. And I want to highlight, we are seeing now states that we've always been watching to see if they're going to become more competitive. They are, and I'm going to bring up 2, Texas and Florida. There's been a lot of focus on me holding the 50 seats to make sure our incumbents, or the seats where we have incumbents retiring, places like Maryland and Michigan and others, and Arizona, but those are states that a Democrat currently represents, and we have to hold those. But we have a great opportunity in both Florida and Texas, and candidate quality is part of that issue. We have 2 very unpopular incumbents, so Ted Cruz in Texas and Rick Scott in Florida. We have very strong challengers. Those races are real. They're now in the margin of error. We've continued to see it move, and we just announced this morning, the SEC, that we're making a multi-million-dollar investment into those 2 states. We've made some investments already to kind of build up some of the structure, but now we're going to go in much bigger, knowing that what we're finding, and the polls are pretty clear, these are in the margin of error, but when folks in Florida and Texas have a chance to better get to know our candidates, and Colin Allred and Debbie Mukersel-Powell, they win. They win there. Now, those are not cheap states. They're big states, but the investment is something that we're very excited about. We're able to do. We're not taking away money from all of our races, our must-hold races, but we have an opportunity with fundraising and money coming in that we feel comfortable now. These are good investments we're making, multi-million-dollar investments into Florida and Texas, and with that, we have a real shot at winning those states.
That sounds like a news lead to me. I'm just saying, But let me just say, what you were saying about choice and women's decision-making, it's so beyond, and Senate Democrats realize this apparently, and you can tell us if that's true, but the Republicans simply don't. It's not just women, it's not just women under 50. It's disempowering women altogether, and it's not, so it's all women that are mad at the rights of women being taken away. That's an endemic piece of it. And husbands and friends and people who support women also, men are outraged by the position that the Republicans have on choice also. And are Democrats smart enough to just make that such a central issue? Because state after state where the referendums and the votes are taken, even in Kansas and Kentucky, Democrats win and the issue wins. But I did want to ask, so you can re-comment on that, but
Sure.
How are Senate Democrats countering Trump's recent statement on Zelensky that every time he comes to the U.S. he leaves with another $100 billion? Does he strike a chord on war fatigue, and how do you counter that?
Well, first on the reproductive freedom, there's no question it goes to the core of rights, and it's not just an issue for women; it's an issue for all of us. I won't go into that now, but I've shared a story in my family where with my first wife, where we wanted to have a child, and something very wrong happened, and she needed to have a ENC, an abortion, to save. With the baby that wasn't going to survive, but to save her life ultimately. And we went through a horrific story. I won't go into all of that, and that has been talked about. And after I told that story, it was amazing to me how many men reached out. It was women all over reached out and said, "Thank you for sharing that. You know, we went through this. They've never told the story. They felt uncomfortable about it, but now they felt empowered because people were talking about that abortion's truly about health and life of women and mothers and sisters and daughters and wives." So, but there was the number of men that came out that said, you know, we went through that as well. I never talked about it, but man, thank you for doing that. I'm going to do the same thing. And that's why we're seeing why these referendums do so well, because everybody's been touched some way by this, and they realize that it shouldn't be politicians that are telling families what to do. It's up to them and the women and their physicians. This is something fundamental to the rights that we have as Americans. And so when you look at the referendums in Florida, for example, and you mentioned other states, wherever that's been, huge turnout. I mentioned Michigan earlier. The last public poll that was out showed that their referendum, to undo what Florida has a 6-week ban. 6 weeks. Most women don't even know they're pregnant in 6 weeks. It's horrible. No exceptions. Rape, incest. It's really draconian for women. And right now in Florida, that referendum has got 68% approval. 68% of the people say we're going to overturn what the Florida legislature did for rights. And so here we have candidates. We have Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, who fully supports Roe v. Wade, making sure women have those rights. And you have Rick Scott, who's doubled down, said, I fully support 6-week ban. I don't believe in any exceptions, and I'm voting no on that referendum. So we got a candidate in Florida who's voting no on an issue that is intensely personal, intensely powerful, with 68% of the people in Florida. Now, I've been in politics a while. You usually don't like to be on the wrong side of 68% of the people, especially for an issue that is as important and as powerful as that. That's why we're investing in Florida. That's why we are going to win Florida. We just got to keep pushing and letting people know what's at stake. Back to your question, what's at stake? Elections matter. To Bankeley's questions, elections matter. This election matters so much for the future of this country, decades to come, that people have to get out.
War fatigue.
Well, war fatigue, certainly I think we're still committed to making sure that we have the rule of law in free countries, and we have a democracy in Ukraine that's under attack by a brutal regime of Putin that has done unspeakable things in Ukraine. And as a country and as part of the world democracies, we all need to lock arms because autocracy's out there. We even have a candidate in Donald Trump celebrating people like Mr. Putin, who engages in these horrible war crimes and an unprovoked attack against a free country. We're never going to back away from standing up for freedom in the world. The United States has always been that beacon of hope, of liberty, and of a bright future for everybody. We're not going to secede that. We're not going to walk away from that leadership, especially as Democrats, because we believe that's something everybody should know that we're there for them.
All right, we're going to go to the audience. We have members of the press here who have questions to ask. I think we have a microphone in the...
Okay, I now go to the gal right behind you first.
Hey.
Yeah, please introduce your name and your organization.
Yes. Hi, Senator Peters. Emily Wilkins with CNBC. I wanted to dig into a little bit more about the decision to go ahead and invest in Florida and Texas. I mean, right now, I know you're saying that your internal polls show that Tester is up in Montana. Of course, there's a lot of public polling out there that shows that he's down. And it seems like more money into that race, into Ohio. I think we're just a little surprised with the amount of offense that Democrats have to play. What led to the decision to invest in Florida and Texas? Was it more funding coming in that you didn't expect, or just better polls that you didn't expect? Thanks.
Well, that's a multi-part question to answer as well as the ask, because it's about kind of all of that stuff that we have to look at. So, and as Diaz chair and my team, we have to make those kinds of assessments real time, and we're following all the races very, very closely with our polling. We do a lot of part of what the DS does too, message development with focus groups, all the things that we'll do to get a sense of what's going on in the state. But certainly, I'm a data guy. We're going to look at data and see where things are, because I don't have unlimited amount of money, and you've got to be able to spend it very wisely. I have a kind of a quick saying for folks: if you're gonna win your race, I'm probably not going to give you any money, and if you're going to lose your race, I'm not going to give you any money. But you're right in the middle, and you're on the edge. We're all in. We're going to do everything we can to get you, because the only metric that I care about is that we win and we have the majority. And if we can expand the majority, let's expand the majority. That was the metric we did. And sometimes that's hard decisions. I had to make some hard decisions last cycle of races where we had to move money around at the end, and we went to places. Just a quick example, we saw Pennsylvania starting to slip away. We were really worried about Pennsylvania, and we put a lot of at the end. I said every penny I got coming in new is going to Pennsylvania. That paid off. We won, and we picked up a seat. Those same kinds of thought processes going into effect now. And so we always thought there was potential in Florida, Texas for the candidate quality issues that I mentioned. Those states have changed. I mean, and if you think of Ted Cruz in the last election against Beto, I mean, he only won by a couple points. That was a pretty close election. And Colin Allred is a great candidate, and we're seeing that people really like him. It's amazing the response he gets from folks, which is wonderful. And he's running against an unpopular incumbent in Texas. And actually, Ted Cruz's numbers are worse now than they were when he ran last time. In Florida, Rick Scott has run several statewide races, and even when he has a wind at his back with a strong Republican year, he's never won by more than just a hair over 1 point. So when you only win by 1 point or 2 points, and now we've got very strong candidates in both of those races, and we've got the dynamics of, especially with the abortion referendum in Florida. Those are all very promising, but now we're seeing it in the data. The data is definitely showing some great momentum for us there. We expect there's a lot of upside, particularly when folks better get to know our candidates better. It's pretty powerful in terms of the numbers, and so we made the decision that we got to start investing. People around the country, I'm sure, will be investing to try to win all of our seats, but they'll be focused on that. We're making this multi-million-dollar investment now, and I'm very confident there's going to be more coming. So I feel good about where we are.
So let's go to, go ahead behind.
Are you talking about me? Hi, Senator. I'm Bridget Bowman with NBC. I just wanted to follow up on Emily's question. Can you describe, I know the committee has said it's a multi-million-dollar investment. Can you describe how much is going to be spent in each state, or how much you're looking to spend? Yeah,
we're not sharing that information right now for strategic purposes with how we do that, and there's a fine line of what you want to say publicly and what you don't, because we're in a battle right now. But obviously those numbers will be clear as we start doing what we're going to be doing. But right now we're not talking specifics. That is what we're putting in, and that we're making the kinds of decisions regularly as in the previous question as to how we deploy that in those states.
And I think you said earlier that you're not going to be taking money away from your must-hold states. So are you, as the committee, as the party, committed to staying engaged in Montana specifically through the election?
Absolutely. Yeah, there is no world that you can conceive of that I'm not going to be into Montana right to the very end. John Tester will have everything that he needs to win. But as I mentioned earlier, he's also a great retail politician. He's traveling around the state. He's getting to know people, and the contrast between him and his opponent, who has significant flaws, will bear big dividends on Election Day.
Thank you.
I don't think I introduced Ida Morganti, who's our mic giver, and she is from German Press herself. And Ida, if you could grab the mic after the person asks the question, then we can move it to the next person. We'll be somewhat more efficient. So let's see. Right, where do you want to go? How about in the back? Did you have your hand raised in the back? Go ahead. Raise your hand again. Go ahead. Right there, black hair.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much. Hi, Senator. I'm Samantha Jo Roth with the Washington Examiner. I wonder if you could talk about, a lot of people are saying, I think you said 40 days until the election, our candidates are going to win once people know them. What would you say to people who say 40 days out, maybe it's a little too late?
It's not, because people are starting to focus more on elections. You'll have a lot of folks, certainly people on the presidential race. Folks know Donald Trump. He's been around a long time, so there's really no new information to put out about him. Kamala Harris, though, still has to, as a vice president, you don't get the same kind of exposure that you would, certainly not like a president, and so she is out there getting to know, and we know the same dynamics as people get to know Kamala. She's doing extremely well. And when folks see the amazing performance like she delivered at the debate, talk about a clear contrast between two candidates. You can't get more different, and she just was brilliant, I think. People will see that. And now then they're looking at Senate races. I mean, even when you look at all the Senate races, there's still large amounts of undecideds. They're starting to close, but a lot of voters make those decisions fairly late. Voters have a lot on their mind. They got their regular lives. It's sometimes surprising for all of us in the room. Most people are not thinking about politics every day. That's just not what people do. They're busy with what they do. But as the election gets closer is when they start focusing and taking in information. So this is really the ideal time to be making the difference. You turn out your hardcore partisans, make sure that they're getting out to vote. We identify those. Those are the people you already see taking sides on both sides, but there's still a big pool of folks who, they may lean one way or the other, but they're still open to getting information, and that's who we focus on right now. So that's why you can't stop campaigning till you run through the tape. And it's amazing if you look at exit polls too, in our races in Michigan and it's other places too, the number of people that make decisions in the last couple of weeks is a pretty large number. It's a deciding factor.
Okay, before we get to the very end, we want to thank Alan Kotak, the National Press Club photographer who's here, been shooting the event, and he made a special occasion to come at this early hour of the morning, so we thank you, Alan, for doing that. And also, we want to very much thank C-SPAN's producers, Alan Speck and Rob Harleston, who've been with C-SPAN for decades and worked literally thousands of programs. And they thought that today's event was important enough for them to provide this kind of coverage, and we're very, very grateful to C-SPAN for doing that. Okay, and we're going to do exactly that. So go ahead, right in the front. Yeah, our press club colleague. Here we go. Oh, right here. But Ida, right here. Oh, okay. And then we can go right back to that person.
Thanks for doing this, Senator.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, Joseph Morton, Dallas Morning News. Wanted to talk just a little more about Texas, kind of the topic of the day here, I guess. You talked about the importance of candidates localizing these races, staying focused on what's important to folks on the ground. And Colin Allred was asked a few weeks ago by reporters if he was expecting any help from you guys, and he said no. He said at the time, I know Texas better than the National Party does, and I don't think the National Party necessarily could win here, but I can. So in addition to what you guys are seeing in the data about why you think the race is close, what are you seeing that you think you guys can provide something to help him with coming in as the National Party?
Well, from the DSCC's perspective, we provide resources, so that he just needs to have the resources to be able to get his message out, talk about issues that he cares deeply about and the people of Texas care about, and if we can help get that message out, we know that he will be successful. But it is his message. He knows Texas inside and out. I would never pretend to know anything about Texas, and when he's my colleague in the Senate, and I need to know something about Texas, he'll be the person that I'm going to go to, and he'll tell me. So that's why Texas needs Colin Allred, someone who cares deeply about the state, who shares their values, who's going to stand for women, for example, with reproductive freedom. The contrast that he can paint between himself and Ted Cruz is pretty stark. And when he gets that out and has the opportunity to do that with our help and with the help of other folks who also share his values, he'll be successful.
Okay, and right in the back there was that person. There you go, with the headband. Yeah.
Hi, Isabella with ABC News. You'd been talking about pickup opportunities for you guys, but Republicans are really seeing places like Maryland as a pickup opportunity for them. What's your investment strategy and kind of ground game there?
So we have to hold Maryland with Ben Cardin's retirement. We have Angela Alsobrooks, who's a great candidate running there. Everybody who has a chance to get to know her too around the state is incredibly impressed. She's running against someone who has pretty broad name ideas, a former governor, so that is something that she needs to deal with by making sure that she gets to be better known. The DSCC, we've made substantial investments in the Maryland. We'll continue to do that. She will get the resources she needs to get her message out and to talk about what she will do for the state. The state is a heavily Democratic state. And so our get out the vote efforts are particularly important there. We have the voters are there. We just get them to the polls and understand that what's at stake, this is really important for folks in Maryland, is the majority of the United States Senate. That if Maryland doesn't send a Democratic senator to the Capitol, we likely wouldn't be in the majority. So Maryland is critically important for that. And they're Democrats. They understand that. They're supporting Kamala Harris by a very large margin. And they want to make sure that Kamala Harris is successful, and a Democratic Senate is critical for that.
Well, also Brooks beat a sitting congressman who spent 10 times as much as she did in the primary,
Right.
10 times as much.
Pretty remarkable.
And there's a poll yesterday that shows that she's 11 up. So it looks good for you right now in that seat.
Yeah, I feel real good. I feel really good.
Right in the front row.
But again, we never take the foot off the gas till we run through the tape. I guess that's two metaphors, running and driving.
Thank you, Max Cohen, Punchbowl News. Thanks for doing this. On Ohio, a state we haven't talked about that much today, there's recent data that showed Republican groups outspending Democratic groups on the air there at this moment in time. Are you concerned about that spending disparity, and what is the DSCC's plan to invest in Ohio?
So we're very involved in Ohio. There's no way I'm losing Ohio. Sherrod is an amazing senator and a friend of mine with the state. Ohio and Michigan share a lot in common. We have different views on college football, but for the rest of those states, or those two states, are very in common. So Sherrod is a gentleman who's been able to win in a tough state. As a statewide office is the only Democratic office holder, and he's done that because he's authentic. He cares about folks. Particularly his strong union position is something that union members in Ohio know and support, and will be out in force. He has resources. We need to continue to invest in Ohio. We're not done investing in Ohio, and it will take more money. But right now you have a lot of outside groups that are dumping tens of millions of dollars against Sherrod, trying to prop up another highly flawed candidate. I think Bob alluded to it. This is a guy, he's running against Marino, who said that women over 50 don't care about reproductive freedom because they can't have kids. I mean, that's offensive to just about everybody. So his opponent makes offensive comments. And that's not helpful, no matter how much money you have and how much you spend. That's going to cut through. But but he'll have the resources he needs.
Okay, it is 9:26:50, and we're going to go till 9:35 since we started 5 minutes late. Is that all right, Senator Peters?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so
I'll do
9:35.
shorter answers so we get more
We're
questions.
fine.
How's that?
And C-SPAN wanted the 1 hour line, so okay, go right there.
Hello, Senator. Nicholas Anastasio from National Journal and Hotline. Going back to Texas, it's going to be a big topic this day. But at the state at this time in 2018, O'Rourke was outspending Cruz, and he had outside Democratic support at this time. Are you confident that Allred is outpacing O'Rourke at this time during the 2018 campaign?
Well, it's there are a lot of dynamics involved. You can make some comparisons. One, we also see in the numbers that Ted Cruz is less popular in Texas than he was when he ran last time. So Colin's got an opportunity to show that contrast more significantly. Colin's actually outraised Ted Cruz the last few quarters, so he's getting resources already. And now with DSCC investments coming in, and likely more investments coming in, he's going to be able to close that gap going forward. So I feel really good where we are, and we look at the numbers of how well Colin does when people get to know him. They're really powerful. So we're very optimistic.
So, red sweater.
Hi, Chairman. Simone Pethe from CNN. Thank you for doing this. I wanted to ask you about another state that you are not currently engaged in, Nebraska. What are you seeing there? Do you see any chance that the Republican senator will be defeated this year?
So we do not have a Democrat running in Nebraska, and so I'm not engaged in that in any way.
Can you say anything about what you're seeing in the state?
I'm not engaged. I don't pay attention to Nebraska. I got a lot on my plate right now. I got a lot of states that I'm watching. So I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer, but we don't have a Democrat in Nebraska, so I'm not involved.
Hi there. Thanks for doing this. Patrick Svitek with the Washington Post. You mentioned you're not taking resources away from the must-hold races, and you suggest there's new money for Texas and Florida investments. How much of a role did the Harris campaign transfer play in being able to open up these new pathways, either that initial $10 million transfer or anything else that may have come in since then from the Harris campaign?
Well, yeah, obviously all the money comes in is helpful. It was nice to get that money coming in. I say, we budget regularly, so we're budgeting for all of our. So we're not going to. When I say we're not taking money away, we're going to meet all of our budgets, all of our commitments, all the things that we think we need to do in all of the states. But as new cash comes in, that gives us more flexibility to. And that's always the case. So it's not unusual to have the cash coming in at the end. We're at a good part right now because there's just so much enthusiasm for Kamala Harris in this race, and it's also helping our Senate races because folks realize